Welcome to this episode of The Wolf and the Shepherd. We're here today talking about the English band The Smiths. It was a band that I really liked growing up, meant a lot to me early on in the days, and so we're going to go through and talk about all the things that The Smiths did in their short lived career that they had in England.
I know this sounds like a rather strange topic 3 podcasts in, but as you mentioned, you and I both love the Smiths for very
Yes.
different reasons. You being from Texas, I mean, I don't know how the Smiths reached you and what relevancy they had to your life, but for me, growing up in England, it really shouldn't have connected with me either because I'm a very handsome man. You
Not
know,
as handsome as I am, but
wow.
you're almost
There will
there.
no, there will be a poll on the website eventually where people can decide that.
And
Uh,
I'll make sure that that is directed towards me
yeah,
winning
you
that
can't
vote.
send people money through PayPal to vote for your attractiveness.
Oh,
But
be
anyway,
careful. I'll figure out a way to do that.
well, yeah, okay. But anyway, the point is, there was no reason really I should have been attracted to the Smiths lyrics or to their music.
Why so?
I because I was very into the new romanticism of Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet at that point in time. Just kind of music which, yeah, I couldn't relate to in terms of living that lifestyle. But the Smiths came out, and the first song I heard was "How Soon Is Now." I think that was the first one, or "What Difference Does It Make?" And I listened to those lyrics, and I couldn't decide whether it was Johnny Marr's guitar or Morrissey's voice because there was a long period of time before I really kind of truly listened to the lyrics. And, there are parts of the Smiths' lyrics which apply to everybody when you're a teenager, especially back then when you couldn't find, I guess, a support group. We didn't have the internet. You couldn't go on a forum and be, oh, let me find everybody who's depressed about this. It
Well,
just didn't
sure,
exist.
sure. We're talking about the mid '80s. We're talking about
Right.
1982,
Mm-hmm.
1987. That is
Yeah.
when the Smiths were actually out there. They were officially a band, and then they
Yeah.
disbanded somewhere around 1987. But of course, way back in those times, there was no internet. It was in its obvious infancy. I
Yeah.
mean, the internet was there. It's
Yeah.
been around since the 70s, and we're
Yeah.
not going to get into the history of the internet with this, but for the general public, there was no way to see the internet. So you still had the normal music machine pumping out music that you were going to hear.
Yeah.
And the Smiths came around in that time. Yes, you had How Soon Is Now, which was the big hit for the United States. That's how most people know the Smiths. Most people know that song, probably don't even know that it was by the Smiths. They just know that song. They
Right.
say, oh, yeah, I like that song. That was in one of the John Hughes movies. I
Okay.
remember that song.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they just listened to it on a soundtrack from a John Hughes movie.
Yeah.
But it still hit certain kids, certain people, especially in the 80s.
Yeah. It was kind of strange that they were a band who produced. Well, I mean, Rough Trade were the I think first label they went on, and they exploited the Smiths pretty badly because after one album, the eponymously titled The Smiths, Hatful of Hollow came out, and it's like, oh, right, a greatest hits album after one album, but it was made up of John Peel sessions, who's a BBC radio presenter who did some awesome sessions. It's like the equivalent, I guess, of MTV and Unplugged,
Sure.
just but on an audio basis on
Yeah, and I know
Radio
you and
One.
I have talked about before where over in the United States it was always MTV, but then you had the British show.
Yeah,
What was it called that you first saw them on? The
Oh, Top of
live,
the Pops.
yeah, the Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
So see, we didn't really have
Terrible
that
show.
in the United States, but
Yeah.
Top of the Pops was a big deal for the
Yeah.
Smiths.
Yeah. And it was weird when I first listened to Hatful of Hollow because I didn't know the Smiths' first album. I listened to Hatful of Hollow and I listened to songs like Back to the Old House, Reel Around the Fountain, and for the life I had at the time, like I said, I was a lovely looking person. I was doing pretty good with soccer. It shouldn't have maybe resonated with me, but there were just lyrics or maybe something in Johnny Marr's guitar which just brought me in. And I can't say I listened to a song like William, It Was Really Nothing, and try and think, all right, well, I know what this is talking about because I really don't. But and in that song, it's purely about Johnny Marr's guitar. But
Sure.
we go to Please, Please, Let Me Get What I Want. The lyrics on that, as I've said to you before, I don't think there's a teenager anywhere who can listen to those lyrics and not identify with those lyrics of Please, 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 Let Me Get What I
Right,
Want.
and there's obvious connotations with please, please, please let me get what I want. I remember growing up with a friend of mine, good friend of mine, when we were growing up. We actually were in a band together years ago. He was a big Deftones fan, loved the Deftones. And the Deftones released a record that they called it B-Sides. And they covered the song Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want. And so my friend plays this song for me. He's like, man, I really like this song. And I think it's a cover song, but I'm not really sure. And so he plays the song for me, and I said, dude, this is a Smith song. Do you know who the Smiths are? He's like, the Smiths? You mean the family that goes to church with us? I'm like, no, it's a legitimate band.
Uh-huh.
The Smiths, you really haven't heard of them. He's like, no, but listen how great this song is. And I said, why do you think this song's so great? He's like, well, just listen to the lyrics and the music. And I said, well, the music is probably written by Johnny Marrs in this song. I remember hearing the original version, then the Deftones version. The lyrics are obviously the same. Like, this is legitimate Smiths. So then I played the Smiths version for him, and I had it on my iPod. That we're talking about way back in the day, right?
Yeah.
So now I've got an iPod. I'm like, hey, you got to listen to the original version. It's like, wow, that's amazing. The actual original version is better than the Deftones version. You got to remember, this guy loved the Deftones, right? And the Deftones, they're a great band, but he listened to the original version and he said, wow, this is a great song. And I'm like, absolutely, it absolutely is. It is an absolute great song, and the message, as simple as that song is, that is on that Hatful of Hollow compilation album, is such a great song.
Yeah, and the songs on Hatful of Hollow, which were from the John Peel sessions, were taken in one take. They weren't produced. And so I think the version on there, it was just a one-off song. But the lyrics of Please, 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 Let Me Get What I Want is almost poetry to me.
It absolutely
and
is.
You look at There Is a Light That Never Goes Out is modern poetry. If you want to look at the modern age, you listen to that and somebody being in love, and it doesn't matter whether you're 15 years old and being in love for the first time. I think There Is a Light That Never Goes Out just touches a whole, different chord. Because, lyrics like, and if a double-decker bus crashes into us, to die by your side is such a heavenly way to die. I mean, it's not classical poetry, but it's current poetry that, kids can feel, adults can feel. But again, the riffs that Johnny Marr played on that song, I mean, those two songs, Please, 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 Let Me Get What I Want, and There Is a sorry, there is a light that never goes out. I think those are the two most covered Smith songs, and for very good reason, because the music is almost perfect, but the lyrics are absolutely pure poetry.
Sure. So if you look at the song "Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want" by the Smiths, and seriously just go into Google, look up the lyrics. The lyrics are very short, but it is very poetic. If you look at the lyrics, it's good time for a change. See the luck I've had can make a good man turn bad. So please, please, please let me let me get what I want this time. I haven't had a dream in a long time. See the life I've had can make a good man bad. So for once in my life, let me get what I want. Lord knows it would be the first time.
Yeah.
That is no kidding. Right there in what did that take me? 20 seconds?
Yeah.
That's the whole song.
Yeah.
It's so much better than what we have now
Yeah.
as far as lyrics because
Yeah.
we've gone so dirty, we've gone so beyond what we should be doing in music, and the power that those lyrics have in
Yeah.
that one song, which wasn't even a big, huge, famous Smith song, right?
Yeah.
It was just one of those ancillary songs. It's not
Yeah.
How Soon Is Now. It was one of those kind of off the cuff B-side Smith songs. It's a powerful set of lyrics. It's
Yeah.
powerful poetry. It's speaking to so many people.
Yeah. And I've heard that song in so many more movies a decade or so after the Smiths split up than, it was ever used in while the Smiths were still in existence. I mean, without that Hatful of Hollow album, I would have never possibly for a decade have heard that song. But, I have a good friend, Danny, who I used to coach in soccer. He's a huge Smiths and Morrissey fan, and he's a really smart guy, but what really touches him about the Smiths is the lyrics. I don't even think he was born by the time the Smiths broke up, but he appreciates the lyrics, and he can see the poetry and how a lot of those words, it can speak to somebody in 50 years' time. You read, please, 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 let me get what I want to somebody, they will identify with it.
Sure. And, you can pull the Deftones version out, but believe it or not, Hootie and the Blowfish actually covered this song. I mean,
Wow.
Yeah, Hootie and the Blowfish. I remember when I was younger, way back in the day, my wife went to a lot of concerts.
Yeah.
Lot of concerts. My first concert I ever went to was Hootie and the Blowfish.
Wow.
And I had a friend of mine. It was really my dad's friend, but then became my friend as well. And he worked for a company that did promotional things, and he gave me some concert tickets. And he said, "Do you know who Hootie and the Blowfish is?" I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "Here's 4 concert tickets." And we went to, at the time, it was called Starplex.
Sounds like that Friends episode.
Yeah. and so, no kidding, I remember my first concert was Hootie and the Blowfish.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there saying, I'm not really a big Hootie and the Blowfish fan, but this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Seeing live music.
Wow.
And nowadays, in taking the COVID stuff out, because depending on when you're listening to this, if you're listening right now in September of 2020, or you're listening to this in the future, we're still in this COVID mess where we can't go do anything, right? But before, you would go to live music shows, and maybe you'd go to an intimate show in some little club, and there might be 50 people watching it, or maybe you go to a big festival show or whatever. So my first concert experience was Hootie and the Blowfish, and they covered this song.
Wow. Mine was Duran Duran.
No kidding.
That was the first band I saw live in concert. And that's why partly you say that there should have been no real reason why the Smiths, there should have been any attraction for me. But I was always really good at English literature, and Morrissey's lyrics and listening to the lyrics of those songs just hit something with me. It resonated with me. Now you take some of Morrissey's later songs where he really doesn't pull any punches. If you have titles like "You're the One for Me, Fatty," or "I Hate It When Our Friends Become Successful," there's not
Sure,
really.
but you're also talking about
Yeah.
Morrissey when he's Morrissey.
Yeah.
He's not in the Smiths.
Yeah, but you go "How Soon Is Now," and that is a beautiful title. I mean, you think about, even on a philosophy terms, "How Soon Is Now." I mean, what a beautiful title for a song. And what difference does it make? You listen to the lyrics in that song, and what difference does it make? I mean, like I said, I think the Smiths, I think Morrissey and Johnny Marr, whoever penned most of those lyrics, it was pure poetry. And that's why I think so many people nowadays still identify, love the Smiths, and you've got new Smiths fans because they can see it was brilliance. I mean, the guitar work was fantastic. The lyrics are brilliant.
Absolutely. And you turn around and you think about Johnny Marr, the way he played guitar, and knowing the fact that he was, I'm not saying he's the first person to figure out a way to make the guitar sound different, because there were plenty of people before him.
Sure.
And if we had Johnny Marr sitting here right now, he's going to say, I'm not the greatest guitarist in the world. I remember there was a interview, I think it was with Eric Clapton, where whoever was interviewing Eric Clapton said, how does it feel to be the greatest guitarist in the world? He said, I don't know, ask this guy. Because all the great guitarists, they never want to say they were a great guitarist. But most people don't really know about Johnny Marr.
Sure.
They don't. And it's kind of sad because now we're in the age of music to where everything's computerized, everything goes into a MacBook Pro, and you can control the way your voice sounds, you manipulate the music, you create it on the computer. You don't need somebody creative like Johnny Marr playing stuff. But I can imagine Johnny Marr sitting there playing a song, and I think you and I have talked about this before, about Johnny Marr going into the studio, playing a certain riff, and saying, okay,
not being able to replicate it.
You know, go ahead and hit record, right? And they hit record, and he plays that, and then the sound engineer is saying, okay, well, because of the way we record music, you need to go ahead and play that again the exact same way you did it before. And Johnny Marr looking at that guy saying, I can't do that again. I'm sitting here and I'm just playing by feel. I'm playing what's coming to me right now. And there's actual feeling, there's actual just emotion behind the music. And we're missing that now. And I think there's a lot of bands, and I say bands, but maybe it's just solo acts, whatever, that are trying to replicate that. And they just can't figure out how to replicate it because you have too much production value behind it. You've got the feeling out of the music. You've got the perfection just kind of being loaded in, saying, okay, well, I'm going to put this into some kind of computer program to say, oh, your beat is off a half a step here, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to drag this way. Look at it on the computer screen and look at the wavelengths and all this. And we've lost a lot of that music feeling that we used to have.
Would you not think that obviously today's music is more beat driven? It's not lyric driven. I can't remember too many songs. You know, there are some artists who I don't even really like that much, who I do actually like the lyrics. But, you know, again, going back to the titles of the Smith songs of How Soon Is Now, what difference does it make? And even when Morrissey, his first solo album, Every Day Is Like Sunday, I mean, if you expand, on a philosophy basis just on that title, Every Day Is Like Sunday, what's that really saying? I mean, just even the title itself, forget even reading the lyrics of that song, just the title, just to me is just pure brilliance.
Sure, but what is the attraction for a young person to make music? They don't really even care about the part about making music. They really care about being famous.
Right.
I don't think Morrissey or Johnny Mars cared about being famous.
Yeah.
They cared about giving their message.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Jimi Hendrix cared about being famous. He had a message that he was trying to get out. I don't think that several of the artists from way back when cared about being famous. They had a message that they wanted everybody to hear.
Yeah.
They would go to festivals, they would go on different tours. They had a message they wanted everybody to hear. Nowadays, it's how many streams do you get? How many likes on Instagram do you get? How many likes do you get on your TikTok? How many social media hits do you get? Because that is what is interesting now. And I read an article today, and I'm glad we're kind of talking about this today because I saw this article and I was shocked that for the first time, and we're talking in September of 2020, for the first time in 30 years, vinyl sales actually surpassed CD sales since the mid 80s. So, of course, streaming is taking over everything. But for the first time in 30 some odd years, vinyl surpassed CDs. And the record companies can't figure out why.
Right. And I have obviously, stood there with you in your garage and, you've had your vinyl record player there and you put on Hatful of Hollow by the Smiths. And there's just definitely something about a purer sound that comes from vinyl. And I know, you're a big Smashing Pumpkins fan, and I think some of their earlier albums, some of the lyrics, some of the titles, again, resonated with a disenfranchised youth that felt separated from the rest of the pack, or what the rest of the pack was supposed to feel like. But is there one song that you, and I mean, forget, the famous one, How Soon Is Now, over here in the United States, is there one set of lyrics or one song which just really hit home with you with the Smiths?
No, I think to me it's the story behind all of their songs. They tell a story with everything. Mm-hmm. My big thing with music has always been I want to be able to drop a record onto the turntable, put the needle there, hear the scratch, hear the when it goes on there, and then say, oh, there's some dust on here. Maybe I need to clean this off, or, we're in the garage, like you said, and I left the lid off of the turntable and now I need to clean the record off. I want to be able to play a record one side from the outside of that rim to the inside of that rim. Yeah. And then after the 20 some odd minutes that it takes for that record, stop and say, wow, that was great.
There's not many albums nowadays you can do that with.
Let me go up and flip that over and go to side 2. Let me hear what side 2 has to say. Nowadays, you don't have that. Yeah. It's let me write a song, or let somebody else write a song for me, and just put it out there, get some streams, get some uh, whatever you want to call it, some social media backing, some viral marketing, whatever it
Yeah.
is, to get people to play it for a few months so I can get some streams, so I can get some hits, so I can get some likes, so I can get whatever is going on. Make it popular for a while so I can make a little bit of money on this,
Yeah.
and then I can go on to my next project.
Now, with the Smiths, I think I mentioned earlier, the first record label they were on was called Rough Trade.
Yeah,
And there was
tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there wasn't a great relationship. I think I don't know if Rough Trade, their management, felt the Smiths were, a very temporary thing. It wasn't a very popular thing, so let's try and make a lot of money from them. And again, the early Smith songs in England really didn't go anywhere. It wasn't until later on, when you had Panic and Ask, that they got anywhere near the top 10. I think Panic got to number 2. But, the early songs, even when they did collaborations, just really didn't go anywhere. And I think Rough Trade, again, I don't know what other bands they actually had on the label, but I think they used the Smiths because they realized the Smiths had kind of got this little kind of niche of, again, disaffected youth, and kind of bastardized the whole process. Like I said, who makes a greatest hits album after one album,
Right.
and sells it? And I don't even know, if they even asked Morris's and Johnny Morris, permission at that point. I think they just had overall autonomy over everything and did it. But, going forward with that, by the time it got into the later stage of, the Smiths' existence, I know they had a live album. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head now. But, they also had Louder Than Bombs, which was a compilation album. And I think they had another album, which was a compilation album. And some of it was, collections of B-sides and all that stuff. But, at the time, I still bought every single one. But now, even bands alike, I would not buy a whole album by somebody, because I know I'm going to get 2 good songs and 11 songs of absolute dross. I mean, at what point did we get so commercial? And record labels have always obviously been commercial. I mean, especially EMI, all these, Sony, whatever. But at what point did we get where, if you buy an album, you're going to get 2 good songs, and the rest of it is just going to be absolute trash.
Right. So you also have to go back to the fact that if you look at back in the 80s and you think about Morrissey and Johnny Mars and the other guys, and by the way, forgive me for forgetting the other members of the Smiths, because,
Apparently legally they are not members of the Smiths, and that's what the whole lawsuit says, and why Morrissey moved to California. And
maybe we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah.
But absolutely, if you think about, and I hate that I continue to use the word absolutely, but if you think about the way they had to look at what they were doing, they were young guys, right? They had to be young. I'm going to picture them in their 20s.
Right.
And they've got these record executives saying, do this, dance for the camera, be our monkey. Just you do this, and we're going to pay for you to tour the world. We're going to pay your hotel bill. We're going to make you famous. Just like what's happening today with the streaming and everything else. And so those guys were saying, well, we like making music and we're getting paid for it. And these guys in their 3-piece suits over here with their perfectly tied ties and their nice pressed white shirts with their cufflinks on are telling us to do this. Why would we fight with them? Why would we say, no, we don't want to do that?
Now, can I ask you an off-the-cuff question here?
Absolutely.
What do you think about the Beatles?
I hate the Beatles.
I
And
kind of
you
yeah.
knew that going in. I
Well,
hate the Beatles.
well,
And
yeah,
now all of a sudden, and before everybody just all of a sudden turns the podcast off and says,
it's
"Oh,
like
now,
saying I hate puppies.
yeah,"
Yeah,
and now I hate these guys. Just don't hate me yet,
right.
but I do hate the Beatles. I know I'm in one of those just very confined areas of people that loves music, played in a band, but hates the Beatles. But I do hate the Beatles.
Right.
I, honest to God, hate the
Yeah.
Beatles.
I think they were a band, if you could ever find the most perfect being in the right place at the right time, but they weren't necessarily that great. They, in all the bands of history, I think, fit that profile. Now, don't get me wrong, I think a song like Yesterday, I think is a good song. I think they did a few other good songs, but a lot of their songs, if you listen to their albums, it's just noise. I mean, it's not good.
Honestly, I remember when I bought Pulp Fiction on VHS. When it came out, I bought the special edition that had deleted scenes.
Right.
And quite honestly, I think the deleted scenes on that movie were better than the movie.
Right.
And there was a whole deal about being an Elvis man or a Beatles man. And I'm not saying I'm a big Elvis fan, because I'm not really a big Elvis fan. But in the movie, in those deleted scenes, Mia Wallace is talking to John Travolta's character and saying, "You're obviously an Elvis man, and you cannot like Elvis and the Beatles equally."
Right.
And when I watched that, I thought, I'm obviously an Elvis man.
Right.
I just, if you met me, you knew all my background and what I liked about music, you would pin me as a Beatles person.
Right.
But I guess I'm really an Elvis man, because there's something about the Beatles that I just can't get behind. I understand why people like it, but I attribute the Beatles the same way that my daughter likes Taylor Swift.
Right.
Versus Elvis, to me, was so much better.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying I'm a huge Elvis fan, because I will give the Beatles their due. I will. There were a couple of songs in there that I'm like, okay, those are good songs. I can understand that the way they recorded certain things, they were pioneers in that aspect. If you want to get into the audiophile portion of how they set up the microphones, how they did things or whatever. But if you are honestly a Beatles fan and you got behind everything the Beatles did, and you go onto YouTube right now and you watch Yoko Ono screaming.
Oh, I've seen that.
And you
when the mic was isolated,
and you still get behind that, then you and I have a problem.
Yeah.
Where Elvis, he was, I guess, a good-looking guy, right? And then he got fat and he got on drugs. But you know what? Elvis didn't know how to be a rock star.
Yeah.
The Beatles didn't know how to be rock stars. Right? There was nothing before any of this.
I honestly think it was the perfect storm for the Beatles. I think if they'd have been 5 years earlier, 5 years too late, I don't think they would have become what they became. I mean, in England, it was the Beatles against the Rolling Stones, not the Beatles against Elvis.
Right. But remember, way back in those days, and this was actually before you and I's time, but the Beatles were the quote-unquote British invasion.
Right.
And all of a sudden, this British band came over, and of course, we're talking about the Smiths, but the Beatles kind of predated that, and so it was kind of the same thing. And then the Beatles, all of a sudden, they show up, and it was that that first British
Yeah.
invasion.
I think what a lot of specifically American fans of the Beatles or people who say they like the Beatles, I mean, let's be honest now. I mean, they split up close to 50 years ago.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, like early
Wow.
70s. Paul McCartney
Okay.
formed Wings.
Yeah.
But, they forget the amount of songs like Yellow Submarine and Octopus's Garden when the Beatles went through their drug infused, lyrical phases where, the music just wasn't that good. I think they had, and they reminded me very much of Oasis, who, Noel Gallagher, who,
Big
one of
Oasis fan.
Yeah.
I like the Gallagher
Yeah.
brothers, and I remember growing up and listening to their stuff
Yeah.
and them having their problems.
Yeah, but they Noel Gallagher specifically said, I compare everything we do to the Beatles, right? But his biggest guitar hero, from what I can remember, was Johnny
Mars. Exactly.
Yeah, because there wasn't. I mean, when I started trying to learn guitar, and I was terrible at it because my fingers point in different directions, which are unearthly. The first songs that try and get you to play were songs by the Beatles because they were very simple. They were 3 chords for most of their songs. Very simple songs. I'm not saying that makes a song bad. I mean, if you take if you take a song like from Oasis, like Wonderwall, very quick, very easy to learn.
There's the old joke
Fantastic song,
of the goofy guy with the horrible beard sitting around the campfire that brings his acoustic guitar and says, "Hey, everybody, you want to hear Wonderwall?"
Yeah.
Everybody knows how to play
Yeah.
Wonderwall if they have a guitar.
But
it's a very easy song to play.
But there is no equivalent song, I don't think, with the Beatles that, you have to remember most of their fans were girls, right? And I'm not
Nothing wrong with that.
I'm not saying that as a sexist point
Nothing
of view,
wrong with that.
but that is the biggest market in selling music. It's females, right? And, male-driven bands, if the lead singer isn't good-looking, traditionally they don't tend to do very well. You have to kind of hide the lead singer. You have to have, nowadays, a good video. I mean, R.E.M., nobody bought R.E.M.'s music because Michael Stipe was a stud, right? And you've got this skinny guy, with before long, after Out of Time, whatever, he had a shaved head.
Yeah, he looked like he had cancer before
he did.
got old.
He looked like he honestly looked like he had AIDS, and I think that was the big thing at the time. There was these rumors for decades he had AIDS.
Everybody thought he was gay. Everybody thought he had AIDS. And the poor guy is just sitting out there saying, "You know what? I'm skinny. I've got a hair problem.
Yeah.
Why are you hitting me with this?" But
I could have cured that problem by just making him a few good sandwiches, I think.
Absolutely.
But the point is that music.
Take him to Chili's and give him some baby back ribs.
Yeah.
And we can fix that in 2 weeks.
And outside of, the indie crowd, there wasn't a big female following of R.E.M.
Right.
You went to their concerts, you'd get, like I said, the college crowd, the indie crowd, but it didn't have a big female following. And now I think music is pretty much all pushed towards females, whether it be Taylor Swift, rap music. I mean, the funny thing about rap music is that it's not aimed at the black community. It's aimed towards 12 to 14-year-old white girls.
Sure.
Because those are the ones who have the expendable income, whose parents or grandparents have bought them the iTunes gift cards,
right,
and they download and pay for the music rather than just listening to it on the radio.
Or their parents are paying for their Spotify memberships, and they stream those songs and everything, which goes back to the Smiths, where if they were a band right now, they would have failed. The Smiths would have failed.
I think they would and they wouldn't.
No, they absolutely would fail, because that is why in today's music, the Smiths songs are not those songs that you want to listen to.
Oh, they wouldn't
for
reach
a
number
month.
one. Yeah, no, they wouldn't reach number one.
Yeah.
But I think there are bands like the Smashing Pumpkins. I mean, how many number ones, outside of, and I mean, I don't even know this. I mean, did Tonight even reach number one over here?
Honestly, I don't remember, but I do remember when the MTV Music Awards came out, or the Music Video Awards,
Yeah,
whatever the hell it was, right?
yeah.
I remember
VMA, yeah, videos, yeah, VMA.
there you go,
Uh-huh.
the
And they
VMAs.
won like 9 awards
I
in one show.
remember
Yeah.
recording that
Yeah,
because the Smashing Pumpkins played Tonight Tonight with an orchestra
yeah,
at the beginning of that show. And then, I was a big Smashing Pumpkins fan. I remember going to see them live
Yeah.
on that tour. And that's when Jimmy Chamberlain was in rehab. And so they brought Matt Cameron in, who was the drummer for Soundgarden.
right.
And I talked my now wife, at that point girlfriend, into going to the show because she loved Soundgarden, wanted to see Matt Cameron. And so I got to see Billy Corgan, and I got to see James Eha, got to see Darcy play
Yeah.
bass, and then Matt Cameron sitting there on the drum set, and I'm saying, this isn't Smashing Pumpkins,
Right.
because Matt Cameron's sitting on the drum set.
Yeah.
But she was excited because Matt Cameron was playing the drums, and I remember that show sitting way far away from them and hearing Tonight Tonight played without the orchestra
Yeah.
or everything, and Billy Corgan not being able to sing the song that we all knew was Tonight Tonight.
Yeah.
And I was so disappointed because I didn't get to see him on the Siamese Dream tour.
Right.
I got to see him on the Melancholy
Yeah.
tour, which Melancholy was such a great freaking record. But I was so disappointed, and I said to myself, I never want to see the Smashing Pumpkins live again.
Now, do you think with bands, and this is almost along a Manifest Destiny type idea, that they reach one point of perfection? You know, I think with Smashing Pumpkins, I mean, to me, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness is one of the most beautiful pieces of instrumental music I've ever heard. I mean, I would
100%
I
agree.
would put that up with Beethoven or anything.
Yes.
But the same thing with
Yes.
Smiths, I think they hit a point where really towards the end of that first album, the music they were making, where it hit the heart of every disenfranchised youth, like I said, with please, let me get what I want, and there is a light that never goes out. I think there's a period that they just hit perfection with the lyrics and with the guitar work. I think the same thing with the Smashing Pumpkins. You know, even with other British bands like Coldplay.
Let's not
Yeah.
get started on Coldplay.
But you know what I mean?
That's
There's a
another
period-
podcast.
Yeah, but there's
That's
a period.
another
Yeah,
podcast.
it is. But there's a period where, you know, you take The Scientist or Fix You, and the lyrics and the music, the piano, the guitar work was perfect. And the same thing with U2. You know, when they were at this, you know, point in the early 2 or 3 albums, they broke out of this stuff about singing about religion and kind of got into love, but still had a little bit of politics. They never regained that fandom ever again. And, you know, as a YouTube fan at the time, I didn't understand. I think that was the first band I never understood why they couldn't get back to be as good as they were.
I think most of those bands are always going to struggle with that.
Yeah.
That there's never going to be a way that they're going to recoup that initial just shock factor of
Yeah.
here is my message, here is my music, here is what I have to say.
Yeah.
And once I say it, now I don't have anything more to say.
I agree with that. I think you get it all out of your system.
What
you know?
what more do I have
Yeah,
to say?
yeah.
I just yelled at you. I
Yeah.
just said, here's what I have to say.
Yeah.
And you listened to me,
Right.
and now you heard me, and now I think, well, what do I have left to say?
No, I absolutely 100% agree with that.
And then some of those bands then start thinking, well, I got to find other things I
Yeah.
got to talk about. I got to
Let's sing
sing.
about global warming.
Yeah, I've got to sing about
Yeah.
other things.
Uh-huh.
I've got to yell at you about some other things because I have your attention.
Yeah.
So these are the things I really cared about.
Yeah.
Now you're following me.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Instagram person that says, okay, now you followed me because I'm pretty. Now I'm going to tell you about this.
Yeah.
Music invited that factor of now you've heard what I've had to say. Now I'm going to start saying some things that I really don't care about. But you know what? This old white guy over here wearing the three-piece suit that doesn't give a care about what we're singing about or our music or hadn't heard of us is saying, I'm going to write you a check for $25,000 to go ahead and make a speech about this and get all these youth guys to get behind this stuff. I think that's what we're facing.
Yeah, I think there's been very few bands which have evolved through time that have actually produced quality albums. I mean, I'll go back to REM, you know, and especially with Michael Stipe. You listen to the first few albums going around stuff like Dead Letter Office, but when they went, you know, coming through Out of Time, which had Losing My Religion,
great song,
and all that stuff. I mean,
great
one of the
song.
best breakthrough songs ever because it broke every rule in terms of videos, length of song, style of song should never have been popular whatsoever.
Right.
But, you know, they moved and made the shift into Monster, which at the time, I mean, their own fans were like, this is an abomination. But you listen back to that record now, it's fantastic. I mean, it's absolute artistry. And then
I agree.
And then they went back to more of their kind of folky roots and did stuff like Around the Sun and this stuff. And I mean, I think REM were one of those few bands which went on past a decade where they absolutely evolved through the times and actually continued making beautiful music with beautiful lyrics. And I don't think there's been too many bands which have had a long lifespan which have actually been able to do that. The Smiths, as much as I would have liked them to have gone on for another 2 albums, I think as raw as it was and without Morrissey and Johnny Marr together, that was really the rawness. So when Morrissey went to his first solo album, the lyrics were good, but I think they went along exactly the lifespan they were supposed to have.
Right, and possibly the Smiths might have bowed out too early. Maybe they bowed out at the right time. Maybe they made the right decision. Maybe if you look in the history of what happened with the Smiths and the disagreements between Morrissey and Johnny Marr, maybe that was a blessing in disguise. Mm-hmm. So we would like to thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Wolf and the Shepherd. Hey, we have extremely appreciated all of the support, and we will see you on the next episode.